start chapter 11 at Guildhall. So let's see what is a Guildhall is. Guildhall is normally a town center which is situated at the center of town for common gatherings, especially merchants gather there. Normally people and royal people and everybody gathers there for functions. You see in the story, Lord Mayor throws a grand banquet in this. So if you look at the summary, we first see Prince Edward is heading toward this Guildhall because that is his new goal, to read the Guildhall and stop the ceremony and inherit his rightful place. Unfortunately, he could not enter the Guildhall because everybody gathered there could not allow him to enter. They start humiliating him about his princely speech and they go up to the level of attacking him. At that point, new character appears, that is Miles Hendon. Miles Hendon rescues this prince and takes him away. So we see another important information here. The king is passing away. Now Tom is going to be the king. So the first task he is going to do is to free the Duke of Norfolk. Okay, if we read through the chapter, we see now Tom and the procession is moving to the Guildhall after the river pageant. So the Tom is marveled about the glamour and spectacular nature of the river pageant. So he is wondering and dreaming about this royal life. So after one grand ceremony, they are moving to another grand occasion. That is the grand banquet led by the Lord Mayor. Now we see Tom is attending several ceremonies. So this again creates an impact on him. So in that occasion, Tom behaves quite well because of the companions. The Lady Elizabeth and Jane is beside him and he feels much comfortable. So now after that river pageant, he has transformed into that Tom from the Opal Court to the prince in England. Because of that, now he makes no fuss, he makes no blunders, so he acts in a princely manner in this occasion. Here we see a nice juxtaposition where the situation of Tom, who is enjoying his royal life, is looking at a great ball, and we see Prince Edward, who is the rightful prince to the heir, he is struggling, he is humiliated at the Guildhall gate. So that is nicely portrayed about the predicament of both these characters after they switch their roles. If we move towards the rightful prince now, he is being humiliated at the royal gate because again he is acting in a truthful manner, he is speaking in a royal manner. Because of that, he has become a laughing stock. So every people is having fun and enjoyment. This creates a feeling of humiliation inside of prince's heart. But although he is being humiliated, he defends his ground like a brave person. He is actually acting like a prince. So by looking at this, another character appears to rescue him. That is Miles Hendon, a returning soldier from the battlefield. So let's see what is happening. This intervention of Miles creates no difference because he is wearing clothes similar to the prince. So people think, this is another pauper. So they start humiliating him also. So mob starts attacking Miles Hendon now. Miles Hendon is under heavy attacks. So their life are in danger. In that very time, a messenger from the palace arrives to the scene. The messenger brings sad and devastating news that King Henry is dead. So because of that, all the mobs gathered there become astonished about the news. So given the opportunity, Miles Hendon and Prince Edward runs away. So all the people start bowing in front of Tom. Now suddenly he understands he is the most powerful person in England because now the King Henry is died, now the rightful prince should hold the possession of a king. So he gets the confirmation from his uncle, Lord Hertford, and he realizes that now he is the king. So knowing that his words are the law, he starts proclaiming his first command. So that is, then shall the king's law be the law of mercy, from this day and never more be law of blood. Up from thy knees and away to the tower and say the king decrees the Duke of Norfolk shall not die. So his first command is to release the Duke of Norfolk. He starts his kingship on a firm ground by winning the hearts of the common mass. So he explained he is going to be a merciful king, and he is going to put an end to this reigning of blood. This law of blood and reign of blood means metaphorically suggests the terrible and dreadful punishment given to the people at that time in England. So in this chapter we see now the king is dead. Tom is going to be the rightful king, and his first command shows that he is going to be a merciful king and he is going to be just and reasonable, and he further shows his peace loving. Because of that, all the people in the country are happy because the reign of blood is ended. So the era of King Henry is called reign of blood. So that may suggest, that may give an indication that King Henry is a strict and rude ruler. So people are happy because that reign is going to be ended and new reign is going to be started with Tom, who is acting as a merciful king. The second chapter. So this deliverer is Miles Hendon, as we know. So if we look at the summary, now Hendon is taking care of the prince very well. He has a certain care and love towards this brave and outspoken boy. And further, he saves Edward from John Canty, who came claiming the boy again. So Miles Hendon feels that the boy is out of his wits and out of his senses. Because of that, he vows to take care of him and give him a good protection. So during this page, Miles explained how he disowned his rightful place in Hendon Hall. So by listening to his story, Edward becomes sympathetic and he promises Miles Hendon to restore his rightful things when he becomes the king again. So if you read through the story, we see that while they were walking through the London Bridge, the message that king is dead is heard by the prince. And he feels sad. Though he feels outcasted and banished, in the meantime he feels that now he is the king. He has the royal powers. So that feeling is giving happiness to him. So further, through the marvelous description of Mark Twain, the reader is able to see the legendary London Bridge. So Edward sees the London Bridge is like a small narrow city with buildings which are about 100 or 1000 years old. And further he sees the beheaded heads which are impaled on iron spikes on the London Bridge. So that tells an indication about the severe punishments given to the criminals at that period of time. Suddenly we see John Canty appears and demanding his son. So at that time Edward, the prince, terrified, and he tells that I do not know him, I loathe him, and I will die before I go with him. So because of that, Miles Hendon interferes again and rescues Prince Edward from this ruffian again. So the outcast, the feeling of a king now is germinating inside of this small king. Because of that, he starts commanding Miles Hendon like he is one of the servants. So Miles Hendon is astonished by this, and however he feels sympathetic about the person and he thinks of humiliating him by acting like a servant before this rightful prince. However, it is not the only reason for Miles Hendon to be like this, because he has created sentimental bond towards this boy who has an outspoken mouth and a grace of a king. If you read his own words, he says, I love the bold-tongued little rascal. How soldier-like he faced the smarty rabble and plunged back his high defiance. And what a calmly, sweet and gentle face he has. So he has a reason, he has a certain bond, and he loves this boy because of his appearance and his qualities. So it further tells about the character of Miles Hendon. He is a sympathetic person and we see he is a good friend in need. So we see Hendon's care further because he uses all the clothes to wrap the boy because he is freezing. Because of that action he cannot sleep because he is freezing. He was walking all night here and there to keep his blood warm. So that shows he is a motherly character. He takes care of this prince very well. During his night watch, through his soliloquies, we hear some information about Miles Hendon's life. He has a father and two brothers, one elder brother and one younger brother. He doesn't know whether his father is still alive. Through his speech, we see that Arthur is a loving and caring brother, and we see he is not happy about his younger brother, Hugh Hendon. He speaks hatefully about his brother. So we see there is something wrong with these two brothers. So again, the king and servant game goes on. Prince Edward is commanding Miles Hendon to bathe him. The important thing is Miles Hendon is forced. Miles Hendon is compelled to obey these commands because there is something royal inside that commands. Because of that, Miles Hendon automatically adheres to these things. The reason might be Miles Hendon is a soldier. Throughout his life, he is taking commands, so he automatically obeys to these commands. So again, we see when Miles Hendon tries to sit before the king questions, "How are you going to sit before me?" So Miles Hendon thinks that boy is still not completely in his conscious. Because of that, he decided to continue his role as a servant. So they started to discuss about their matters and their lives. So we come to know that Miles Hendon is not an ordinary person. His father is a baron. His father is Sir Richard Hendon in Hendon Hall. So we find another useful information about that. He has a good bloodline. So through his speeches, we again see about his younger brother Hugh Hendon. He tells about his younger brother like, "You younger than I, a mean spirit, covetous, treacherous, vicious, underhanded, a reptile." We again hear about his beloved Lady Edith. So he described she as a beautiful, gentle and a good character and a daughter of an earl. However, his love story is a misfortunate one because Lady Edith was proposed to his elder brother Arthur when they were very young. On the other hand, this Hugh Hendon, the younger brother, is also eyeing at Lady Edith's fortune. Because of this triangular so-called love affair paves the way to his doom and disaster. According to his speech, we see this Hugh Hendon has a special gift of speaking lies, and further he has the support of his father because his father is very loving and caring about this younger son. Through his speech, we further see that Miles Hendon was uncontrollable and wild person at that time. However, he says he is not harmful for anyone at that time. But Hugh Hendon took the advantages of this everything, lied his father telling that Miles Hendon would run away with Lady Edith. He fabricated some false evidences and trapped Miles Hendon into it. So as a punishment, he was sent to the battlefield for 3 years as a soldier, but unfortunately he was captured by enemies and he was put in a dungeon for 7 years. So he led a miserable life. Somehow or the other he could escape. Now he is heading towards his birthplace to claim what is rightful to him. Here in this story, Prince Edward is sad about his predicament. Because of that, he promised to restore his fortune after he becomes the king. And further, the prince, as the king, he is ready to reward Miles Hendon a boon because he rescued the king and protected him very well. So Miles Hendon demands he and his inheritance to sit before the kings of England. So he is granted of the boon, and however Hendon feels that he is given a boon by a true king because words of Edward is so real and royal. Because of that, Hendon feels that he has received a boon from an actual king. So in this chapter we see certain details about Miles Hendon the deliverer, and we see the caring and loving nature of Miles Hendon towards the prince. We further see Miles Hendon's request to sit before the king because it is a very special thing for a person to sit before a king, because to sit with the king one should hold the similar status. So he is asking for a greater boon for him and his descendants. So in chapter 13, we see that the prince's misfortune is continuing. So the chapter 13 is the disappearance of the prince. If we take a quick look at the summary of this small chapter, we see Miles Hendon tries his best to keep the prince comfortable as much as possible. But however, John Canty is able to deceive Edward and Miles Hendon. If we read through the chapter, we see first at the very beginning we see Hendon is lost his bed because the prince has taken his bed again. So Miles Hendon has to sleep below the door and let the prince sleep on his bed. However, Miles Hendon doesn't get angry because he has endured worse in his dungeon life. Because of that, he thinks this is okay for me. But he knows this tender boy cannot endure this hardship. Because of that, he let the boy to take his bed. However, inside his heart, Hendon seems to be admitting this boy as prince because he admires the way the prince gives commands. So he says how admirable he gives command. He is suitable for a king. So maybe he inside his heart he has a certain belief this is the true king. So he goes on serving the king. He is going out and buying clothes for the king, but he has no enough money to buy a proper cloth. Because of that, he does something he has never done before because he has never sewn a cloth. But out of love and compassion, and because of his empty purse, he has to sew the clothes. So he sews a cloth for Prince Edward. So that is very special. So now he is acting a motherly character. So on his return, he sees that prince is missing. The servant boy says that a boy came telling that Miles Hendon sent him. So because of that, prince went with him. So somehow or the other, prince is lost. From the details given by the servant, Miles Hendon understands that this is John Canty. Miles Hendon is running quickly to find the prince again. So in this chapter, we see that John Canty is not giving up. He is continuously chasing the boy, and somehow or the other, he is succeeded at the end of this chapter. So we will see what will happen to the prince in the future. So if we move to the chapter 14, the topic is Latin form. So the meaning of that, the position of a Lord Protector is the most powerful man in the kingdom. So we are curious now, who is the Lord Protector? We see the Lord Protector is Lord Hertford. So we see how he manipulates the king for his own commands and everything. So we see how powerful this Lord Protector is and how weak the king before this Lord Protector. Okay, if we take a quick look at the summary, we see Tom attends the state affairs and finds some astonishing truth behind these royal walls. In this chapter, he meets another important character, that is Whipping Boy or Humphrey Marlowe. Through this character, Tom is able to build up his character as a king. At the end, we find the Great Seal, as we discussed before. Great Seal comes into play. Okay, if we read through the chapters, at the beginning we see Tom is dreaming. He is dreaming about his shanty life. This is ironic because throughout his shanty life he wanted to be a prince. So he saw a princely dream, royal dreams. But on the contrary, he sees a dream of his shanty life when he is actually the prince and the king. He sees another dream that a dwarf give him 7 pennies. These 7 pennies are a treasure for him. So he can be away from his begging job and he can produce these to his father and the other money to his mother and take care of him. But the situation is ironical because now he is the king, he is the prince. He can do whatever he wants because he holds the treasure himself. But the thing is, he is not the true king. Because of that, he can't reveal himself. The sad reality is, though he is the king, he cannot actually help and support his family. Because of that dream, his feelings are disturbed. He feels sad and he feels that he is trapped inside of this character and inside of this palace. So we see, though he is somewhat comfortable, this position has not something he has been expecting throughout his life. And in the next passage, we see the long process of dressing him. The writer has very descriptively described the process because it is a very long and tedious process. I think the writer tries to show the humor and unnecessary ceremonious nature of this small event in a day-to-day life. So Tom sees this long process of dressing like passing buckets at fire. That means one person is taking the garment and it is inspected by several people. So there are a lot of people inside of the room to support him to wear this dress. If something is faulty, the reverse action happens. The cloth goes backward from hand to hand, and again a new cloth comes and hand to hand and comes to this. So this is a very long and tedious process. Because of that, he felt somewhat tired and boring because of that process. However, this elaborated dressing process is a needful thing for a royal king, because everything is ceremonized to elevate the position of the royal king. So that is how they keep the person separated from the ordinary person. In a way, the writer criticizes this unnecessary waste of time and unnecessary waste of people's energy to dress a person. So in a way, Mark Twain is satirizing the royal ceremonial events. So we see this throughout the story. So at the royal council, we see who is the right hand of the king. So Lord Hertford is standing at the right side of the king, assisting him for everything. So actually he seems to be controlling and manipulating the king. So in the council meeting, he experiences things that are somewhat extravagant, some unnecessary expenses, and how corrupted their works and everything. But however, the prince has to watch everything because he can't do everything. He is acting like a shadow of a king, because everything is done by his right hand, that means the Lord Hertford. So he has no right to speak or act. All he has to do, give his agreement to the suggestions they made. So Tom feels somewhat lazy and somewhat boring and somewhat unwanted in that situation. He never feels him as a king on a throne. So the first thing he sees that the royal coffers are empty, because the king has 1,200 servants, so they have to be paid. Because of that, the royal coffers are empty. So this shows the extravagant lifestyle of royal people, the kings inside of palace, which is a burden to the economy in the country. So Tom tries to bring a practical solution by reducing the servant, but his idea is not considered by anyone in the council meeting. And we further see now the Lord Hertford is going to be promoted to Earl of Hertford, and his brother is going to be promoted, and everybody in the family are going to be given a huge amount of wealth. So we see the corruption of power. When they have absolute power, they heap up the wealth and everything. This common nature of power and absolute power is brought forward by Mark Twain in the story. So Tom sees this, he wants to protest, but he sees he has no power. He is manipulated by his right hand, that means Lord Protector. Because of that, unwillingly he has to sign all the suggestions given by them. So because of that, he feels that he is not the king. He feels that he is a shadow of the prince. Everything is done by people around him. So he sees that the king's position is not something important one. Because these royal affairs are boring and he sees that he has no power, he starts dozing and sleeping inside of the royal chamber. So finally he gets the chance to get away from that boring situation, and he enters his royal chamber. So this is a very important place for the development of the character of the prince, because he meets the whipping boy Humphrey Marlowe. The whipping boy helps him to develop his character as the king. So this story of whipping boy is another criticism about royal practices. This whipping boy has to get punishment instead of the prince. If the prince doesn't study well, so the punishment goes to the whipping boy. So he takes the punishment instead of the prince. The thing is, royal body cannot be touched by anyone. So that is his divine right. So nobody can punish the prince. Because of that, the teachers use whipping boy to give the punishment instead of the prince. So by hearing the utterance of Humphrey Marlowe, we can see his sad predicament of his life. So Humphrey Marlowe says, "My back is my bread, oh my gracious league. If it go idle, I starve." So it is pathetic. As we see, he gets punishment to take care of his two orphan sisters. So he is an orphan, so he has to take care of his sisters. So if he is not get trashed, he is not given any wage. Because of that, Tom promises not to stop studies, and whipping boy is going to continue his job as a whipping boy. And further, he finds whipping boy has certain use because whipping boy has knowledge about royal affairs and everything. Because of that, this whipping boy helps Tom to unwrap certain royal mysteries. So that helps him to be more comfortable with his royal affairs. So in the meantime, Tom gets another challenge that he has to dine in front of the public to show that king is okay, because there are some rumors about king's ill health condition. So to overcome that public censor, Lord Hertford thought of arranging a public dine where the prince dined in front of the public. So Lord Hertford is trying to teach certain royal manners and etiquette to the king, but to his surprise he sees that there is an improvement in the character of Tom. Actually that has happened because of this whipping boy. So Lord Hertford is going to ask about the royal seal, the Great Seal. As we discussed before, this royal seal, this Great Seal is a symbol for royal power. So it has the same power as king because it gives the legal power to the commands of the king. So it actually represents the king. Why Lord Hertford is so much worried about this Great Seal? The thing may be when he has the hold of this Great Seal, he has the true power of the king. So he doesn't need to consult the king for everything, and he can give command and control the country as he wishes. But for the dismay of Lord Hertford, Tom cannot remember where the seal is. So that means he has to consult the king for his every matters. He has to get the consent from the king for every legal actions. So this chapter summarizes how the dream of Tom is actually ironic and how his dream is ironic to his situation. But Tom actually feels about the ruling of the country and what remark Mark Twain is making about this ruling and the system of ruling. And we further see the ironic situation of whipping boys because he has to get punishment to survive. And we further see the support of whipping boy for the development of the character of Tom as the king. And it further says why the Lord Protectors are trying to have a public dine. Okay, let's see what will happen in next chapters. So let's move to chapter 15, Tom as king. So in this chapter, Tom acts as a real king as he proclaimed. He acts as a sympathetic and wise and intelligent king. If you take a quick look at the summary of this chapter, Tom gets the chance to do several trials. Tom is able to pass several judgments as the king. Because of that factor, he has become more comfortable as king. So these few judgments actually cast off his shyness and his worries and his discomfort and everything, and trials help him to become the king. Tom proves to be a true and merciful king in this chapter. The reason behind that, he could give solution for two trials in a wise and merciful way. That helps him to be more comfortable as the king. So that triggers his feeling of kingship inside him. So if we start reading through the chapter, we see he is not still comfortable with his post on the throne. He does not feel that he is the king. So this utterance summarizes his situation. He looked sufficiently like a king, but he was ill able to feel like one. The thing is, Lord Hertford is still manipulating him and take decisions on behalf of him. So because of that, he never feels like that he is a king. However, slowly by and by, he is gaining his royal confidence with the help of whipping boy. Later, he becomes more comfortable in royal matters because he has gained some knowledge about that through his whipping boy. So it seems to be he is somewhat comfortable, but still something is bothering inside him, that is dining in the public. he feels not comfortable about that event yet. So this very incident slowly shattering his confidence. So he thinks that he may create a blunder. He would not behave well at the public dining. This very feeling make him uncomfortable and he becomes boring and tired in the royal affairs. But however, suddenly one incident toppled down this situation. This special situation helped him to regain his confidence as a king. So after this incident, he has become a king. So he cast away his every feeling of discomfort and worries. He completely becomes a king at the end of this chapter. That incident is the trial of a man, a woman, and a young girl to execution for crimes committed against peace and dignity of the country. So when he look at the prisoners, he feels compassionate about him. This compassion evokes the king inside him. He forgets that he is not the real king but a shadow. So suddenly he airs his first royal command to others. So that is bring them here. He thought that command would be given a negative response, but it was considered with reverence and everything. Because of that, he feels the true power of a king actually. So now he tastes the true power of a king. So the text says Tom experienced a glow of pride and renewed sense of compensating advantages of the kingly office. That command gave him the confidence how king should behave, what it meant to be a king. So he can order people to do this and that. Because of that, he sensed that now he is a real king. So in his first trial, he identifies the man who was accused to be poisoned man and killed him. But Tom has seen him rescuing a child from the Thames from drowning. And further, he is puzzled by the fact that the man is requesting him to be hanged. So he inquires why, what the reason, and terrifying punishment is revealed because that person is to be killed by boiling alive. So that would give you a certain idea about the brutality of punishment given in that era, because a person is boiling alive is a severe punishment for a person to be given. So instead of that, that person begs for hanging because that is less painful than boiling alive. So when investigating further, Tom realizes that the person is accused without proper evidences, but rather than based on guessings. And he further understood that the evidences are lame and they are based on witches' foretelling. This tells a hint about how law was practiced at that time in England. Judges were partial and they were not educated enough to pass judgments on poor people. So very law to protect them, give punishment to them without any consideration. So that is a serious statement about the law in that period of time. The harsh part of that law was the prisoner was not given a chance to speak on behalf of. So he cannot tell whether he has done the guilt or not. So Tom passes his judgment to let the person free, telling that he was judged lamely. That is an open slap toward the face of the law practiced at that period of time. So this gives a loud round of applause, admiring his wisdom on his judgment. So this judgment cast off the pauper inside him. So the king inside him emerged after this judgment. So he start the second trial. This reveals about unjust punishments practiced at that period of time. So first of all, we see the punishment given to black magic. So this black magic and sorcery were considered as severe crimes at that period of time. Because of that, they were hanged, or most of the time the witches and sorcerers were burnt alive. So because of that, thousands of people were killed and burned down, accusing them as witches or sorcerers. So this woman was accused for raising a storm and destroying a church. Tom's questioning shows that he is a wise person, and the way he asks questions is admired by everybody in that royal chamber. So his question is, suffered the woman also by the storm? He inquired whether the woman was also suffered by the storm. So the reply was, indeed did she, your majesty, and most righteously all over. Her habitation was swept away, and herself and her child left shelterless. So that shows because of this storm, her shelter and house and everything was devastated. So the people inside that chamber sees the wisdom behind that question. The writer further reveals the superstitious belief at that period of time. As they say, the woman has created a storm by pulling off her stockings. So that tells about the fear of people about superstitious belief. That gives an idea about this hollowness, about this superstitious belief. Tom feels the hollowness behind this accusation. So he asked the woman to create a small storm. So he said he would let her and her child go if she makes a storm. The woman's reply was she cannot do something like that. However, how much she is forced, her answer is the same. So his judgment and his judgment command shows that he is a very wise and very merciful king. So his judgment was, I think the woman has said the truth, and my mother were in her place and gifted with the devil's function, she had not stayed a moment to call her storms and lay the whole land in ruins. So that shows he is very logical and he is very practical in giving decision. So this judgment makes him a great king. So people in the chamber and in the country start speaking about the merciful and wise nature of king after this judgment. So this Tom's wise judgment tells about the country's law and practice. Everything depends on the king. If the king is a merciful one, if king practices law in the correct way, then everybody will follow him. So people believe that Tom is a merciful king and his fame is spreading like the wind after this incident.